figure that out.
All right, you're recording.
Fun. Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning and Zoning meeting for Thursday, July 11th, 2019. First order of business tonight will be our public hearings, and the first public hearing will be Section 410 to include cluster-style mailboxes and cluster mailbox area, Amendment -101. Mr. Fick.
Planning and Zoning Commission. Okay, so for tonight's hearing, we asked for the approval of the amendments to 410, which will establish standards for cluster-style mailboxes and cluster mailbox areas. I asked that the ordinance of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, the comprehensive plan City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, and finally the package shown as ADM-101 on the agenda be made part of the record by reference.
Want to speak on behalf or against that tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to our second public hearing, will be Section 405.287, Regulations for Group Home Providers, Amendment -100.
We ask for the approval of Section 405.287, Regulations for Group Home Providers. I ask that the ordinance of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, comprehensive plan City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, and the package shown as ADM-100 on the agenda be made part of the record by reference.
Want to speak on the Group Home Providers public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close that and open up our third one, Appendix A, the listing of permitted and conditional uses, ADM-99.
All right, we ask for the approval of the amendments on Appendix A, listing of permitted and conditional uses regarding group home facilities and dormitories. I ask the ordinance of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, the comprehensive plan of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, and finally the package shown as ADM-99 on the agenda be made part of the record by reference.
Anyone speaking on that issue tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to our final public hearing, which is Section 405.050, Definitions and Interpretation, ADM-98.
All right, we ask for the approval of the amendments to Section 405.050, Definitions and Interpretations, to include the definitions of cluster-style mailbox, cluster mailbox area, transitional living facility, and group home for mentally, developmentally, and physically handicapped persons. I ask that the ordinance of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, the comprehensive plan of the City of Warrenton be made part of the record by reference, and finally the package shown as ADM-98 on the agenda be made part of the record by reference.
Anyone here to speak on behalf of that public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close our public hearings for this evening and open up our regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First order of business will be our minutes from our last meeting on June the 6th.
Accept the minutes. Second that.
I have a motion by Mr. Cooper, second by Mr. Deach to approve the minutes as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Taylor?
Yes. Yes.
Cullen? Martin?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Abstain as I was absent.
Mr. Holt?
Abstain, I was absent.
Motion passes 6-0 with 2 abstentions and 2 absent, correct? We have 2 absent. Thank you. First order of business will be back to the Section 410 to include cluster-style mailboxes and cluster mailbox area, ADM-10 REN. Mr. Graville?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to be back.
Good to see you.
This is the cluster style mailbox, and I don't know how much background you guys have, so I'll give you a little bit of a brief explanation. Probably about 2 years ago, the postmaster here in Warrenton declared that developments needed to have cluster style mailboxes, not individual mailboxes. We got involved with some meetings and contacts with, our federal representatives and state representatives to try to persuade them to allow the individual mailboxes instead of the cluster style mailboxes, and we were unsuccessful in doing that. What ended up happening, we typically don't regulate mailboxes. We just, assume that they put mailboxes that are necessary, for people to, get their mail locally. What ended up happening is we had some developers that did not provide a solution for the cluster style mailboxes, and people were moving into the City of Warrenton and having to go to the post office to get their mail on a daily basis or by weekly basis or whatnot. And they were getting pretty upset about it. And so what we decided was we needed to put in our code, just like with, sidewalks and street lights and water and sewer and all the public improvements, add to that list the public improvement of the cluster style mailbox area. So what this essentially does is not only does it require a developer on a new development to put in the cluster style mailboxes and provide those mailboxes to the residents, it also requires them to take it off city, what will in the future be city dedicated right away. It's a separate area of land, and they have to provide paved area and certain, cluster style mailboxes and provide bond during construction if they put that up right away. And we don't issue occupancy permits on properties until the mailboxes are installed. So this is just kind of moving forward with the times of the post office provider and making sure that the citizens of the city that are moving here have a mailbox receptacle that's local. That's it.
Do we have one, do we have something in town that, the one by the swimming pool, the new subdivision, they have one?
Yes, they have one. After a little bit of pushing back, they put one in, so yeah.
I sort of say that's about the only one I noticed.
Yeah, there's also
I think-
one off Warrior Ridge, right? Yeah, they have one off Warrior, and they put that, we think, in a pretty good location. That's the one that's off the road, right off Warrior.
I have a question about
Yes, sir.
there was a mention in one of the statements that the HOA has responsibility to assign ownership, so to speak, to maintain the mailbox and so on, and land around it. Does each subdivision require an HOA
No.
code?
It will require an HOA moving forward. To be perfectly candid with you, the city of Warrenton does not do stormwater, and so one of the things we're also looking at is, and what happens is the HOAs go defunct, stormwater's not maintained, people are upset about it. We pointed to them that it's the homeowners association and they have no money or no dues to do the mowing or whatnot. We will also be looking at, adding that requirement for making sure the stormwater is maintained on a permanent basis, or, as much as possible. Realistically, you could not have a homeowners association if one person bought a lot that agreed to take care of it and repair it. But we want to make sure if somebody hits it with their car or it gets weathered 20 years down the road, and there's 20, hopefully 100 of these all throughout the city limits, that the city isn't on the hook to go in and replace these because they've not planned for perpetual maintenance or perpetual upkeep of the mailboxes.
So in lieu of everybody having to have an HOA, should the statement stand that the HOA is responsible for the upkeep?
Yes. Yeah. The HOA will be responsible for the upkeep, which will de facto require them to have an HOA.
Question?
I didn't see anywhere in here where there was any mention about size or security of these cluster mailboxes.
That's a great question. We do specify that in our definition that the cluster style mailbox has to be one as approved by the U.S. Postal Service. The federal government regulates what type of devices can be used. Yes, we could require a more decorative feature one, if that's something, or architectural feature to it. Our basic idea was we know it's going to be an expense to the developer to chop off a piece of a lot and have the paving on it and, trying to keep it as low maintenance as possible. Yes, they're probably going to go with the cheaper versions initially, but in our research, it seemed as though U.S. Postal Service has a pretty high standard, for what mailboxes and what type of cluster ones can be used.
My concern was that on the cluster style mailboxes, usually they're relatively small. So if someone gets a larger item, what happens is there's a note in there, that individual has to go to the post office to pick up whatever the larger item was. And for people who are working and who don't get back to their home until after 5, they could go a full week before they get their mail. That's why I was asking about size of these cluster mailboxes.
That's a great question, and I will tell you, one of the things I noticed in looking at these, obviously we don't mandate which ones they get, but a lot of them have like a larger package area on the bottom of them.
But it's not secure.
It's not secure, correct.
Well, it's no more secure than my front porch when they put it on my front porch either.
Yeah, but your Doberman will take care of that.
Mr. Deesh, when you said that, talking about mail, I was thinking about my wife and all the packages we get delivered to our mailbox. She would probably not like this. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something, what we'd like to do is get this in place, and maybe what we can do, you know, Neil can kind of follow up with the ones that are in place and see how the package delivery is working. We kind of need something in place now. You know, to get into some design standards, I think is going to take a longer discussion of this body, and probably some time for us staff to look into it and see what kind of options are out there for design standards, what other cities may have. So my thought is if we can move this forward and then kind of table the issue of, you know, that type of question of design standards and security, and then bring it back in a second wave to kind of supplement this and, you know, maybe adopt something at that point. Our main goal right now is, you know, the houses that are coming in, we're almost pretty much out of, you know, the lots from the first housing boom, you know, the lots, the orphan lots as we call them. So I think, you know, the next subdivisions will be new subdivisions. And one of our intentions over the next couple of months is to really work on our subdivision code, because as you guys will recall, we've not really done a lot of revisions to our subdivision code in a very, very long time, because we haven't had a lot of subdivisions. It's been site plan, conditional use, zoning, districts and whatnot, but subdivisions have kind of been left alone. So this is kind of the start of getting into that. But we'll make a note, and we'll definitely bring some information back on, you know, some design minimum standards for those mailboxes, if that's okay.
My response to that, though, would be, back to your initial statement, is that's just kind of a nuisance. I mean, if I have to go to the post office once a week or once every 2 weeks to get a package versus every day to get my mail, I mean...
Yes,
you know,
but or if you're elderly like me, that
Yeah.
could be...
Can I add something?
if you'll step to the podium and state your name, I'll let you ask a question, ma'am.
Mr. Deesh, maybe you need to stay off Amazon.
Okay, I live up at Arlington, my name is Linda Fisher,
Linda Fisher,
and I
thank
live
you.
up there at the Arlington condos, and we have one of those cluster mailboxes, and in each set, everybody has assigned their little cubby hole. Then there's a bigger box down below, and if you get a bigger package, they leave a key in your box with a little note, and when you go to get your big package out, it automatically hangs onto that key, which the thing is open, but it's empty all night long till the next day when the mail deliverer picks up the key. So it works really well unless you have a really big package. But I mean, I've gotten boxes like this in that little cubby hole, so there's like no kind of security situation at all.
Thank you for your input, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Question answered.
I have
Mr.
a
Cole.
follow-up to that too, and Miss Linda brings up a good point, is, you know, the Amazon truck runs up and down my street all the time, so I think there needs to be an appropriate ratio of large package boxes to smaller ones, because everyone's ordering packages and having them delivered, so one just separate larger box on a cluster isn't going to cut it.
What does Amazon, they don't deliver to
They
your
don't deliver
mailbox,
to the
they deliver
mailbox.
to your house.
Well,
they'll deliver to your mailbox too. Trust me, I know.
Amazon, DHL, whoever it is, you know, like I said, one bigger box isn't going to, you know, be enough for, you know, 20 cluster boxes. Everyone's ordering things online.
Well,
and
I can see what you're saying, like, if it's 3 rows of 10, they should have
Yeah.
three bigger packages.
right, something like that,
Some
some sort of a defined ratio, and kind of
Everybody orders a Roomba at the same time, you know.
exactly a new product. No, seriously, a new product comes out and then half the neighborhood orders it. Where's it going? So, and I guess the second comment I had was, you know, we have to draw a line between not just physical maintenance, but day-to-day maintenance. If I lose my key, is the post office responsible for that? Probably so. I mean, probably would be the same for as if you're maintaining your own post office box in the post office. So I think those types of things, and that's kind of out of the scope of what we're discussing here, but those types of things I think need to be defined as well. Not just physical maintenance and long-term maintenance, but day-to-day as well, day-to-day service.
That one of the things we had talked about doing that we took out because we were like, the subdivision code has been updated for such a very long time, and there's so many things we want to hit, like especially stormwater when new subdivisions come in and say, we want to make sure you guys are maintaining your stormwater. So these aren't projects that build over 20 years that become extremely expensive. Is we had this maintenance bond where they would have to put a bond up with the city that would cover a one-time replacement. We took that out though, right, Neil? Yeah, one-time replacement of it. So we knew if it's a 20-year mailbox, we got 40 years because that money will be sitting in the city coffer. And if they don't use it they don't replace it, we can use it to replace it. But it brought up a whole different issue because it would be a new type of maintenance bond that we had, and we didn't want to kind of shock the conscience all at once. So we just wanted to get this in place, and I think these are great points for design and upkeep standards, because it makes it easier when it's well defined for the employees of the city.
What's the difference between the Warrenton mail and the Wright City mail?
Well, we were told that Wright City was going to be allowed to have their individual mailboxes, and then we were told that they were going to have to go to cluster-style mailboxes. It's the local postmaster's decision, and that's the decision they've made. And we've tried, I think we sent letters, and we made phone calls, and
Contractors even contact.
yeah, contractors, because contractors said, well, the city needs to do something. We're like, well, we're not in the mail business. That's the federal government. And then we realized it was a problem that people were actually having to go up to there every day. So, we feel as though we've pretty much done all we can and have had very little impact through the channels that we typically. And I think it's reality. But what's the difference between Wright City? Is it a different postmaster? Yeah.
Our city is.
Different decision.
The problem they're in,
problem
they
is-
deliver to our,
Yeah, I'm in Warrenton with the Wright City mailing address, and they got new housing going in the back part of our subdivision, and I think they were talking about having to have a cluster mailbox, and the builder said that they didn't have to have it because Wright City said they didn't have to have it.
Well, that was the situation we were in. Do you know any information about that part?
Yeah, so they worked out to where they put
Well, they did do that. Yeah.
with Wright City Postmaster.
Are future subdivisions going to be required to have cluster?
Yeah, most likely futures.
Well, the previously plotted lots that have some buildings on it with individual, even in Warrenton, they've been allowed to keep the individual mailboxes.
Right. When the post office enacted the code, in about 12 or 13 or something like that, there's allowance in there for extension of current existing subdivisions. Different postmasters interpret that different ways. Okay, and so even the developments at Warrior Ridge, Forest Ridge, things like that, those were platted, built. The streets were in before the rule took effect through the postmaster. However, there was no houses there, so then it wasn't really enforced until you got to actually houses getting delivered mail. So in the Meadows at Walnut Hollow, that's under the Wright City zip code, which falls under the Wright City Postmaster. There was some debate on that. It is an extension of the Meadows at Walnut Hollow. It was platted years ago. So they could have fought and had single individual mailboxes. It worked out with the postmaster to just put two mailboxes on one post and kind of come to a compromise and be flexible with the code. And so every situation's different, but fully new, clean developments will definitely be required by the postmaster, whether you guys have a code or not, to have that. So.
Thank you, Bart.
have any questions or comments about this? And what are we doing with this tonight?
I think approving it, aren't we?
Adding it to code.
Probably called you.
No further discussion or questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
Move to approve. M 101 for mailbox cluster.
Have a motion by Mr. Cooper, second by Mr. Taylor to approve section 410 to include the cluster style mailboxes in cluster mailbox area, ADM-101. Any other question or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
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 H?
Yes, but with the right to revisit this at a later date.
And Mr. Barton?
Motion passes 8-0 with 2 absent.
Wasn't listening.
All right, thanks. Good discussion on that. Looking forward to the next one. Section 405 .287 regulations for group home providers, ADM-100. Mr. Graville or Mr. Fick?
So this is simply updating our code. There's been some litigation over the last 10 years with regards to group homes. Group homes are considered single-family residential homes for no more than, I think it's 6 people. That's by federal law and by state statute, like mentally handicapped or physically handicapped people. So this puts in a location restriction between the two. So it's not centralized in one area, which, the idea of diversity in housing. They'll have to register their facility so we can track that, distance requirement. And if they terminate it, they just have to let us know so that we have that in there. So this is in compliance with a state court case and an 8th Circuit case with regards to group homes and group home restrictions, and it's really kind of an update to that.
Very much. Anybody have any input on that? Any motion to approve? So moved.
Approve. From ADM.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Cooper, second by Mr. Deitch to approve the section 405.287 regulations for group home providers, ADM-100, to update the code to meet standards of the state and federal government. All in favor say, let's go roll call vote.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Cullen? Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Next order of business will be Appendix A, the listing of permitted and conditional uses, ADM-99. Mr. Grill?
So this is updating where in the code these are going to be located. One of the things I think you'll see, over the next couple of months as we kind of work on updating the code is, if you look at, like, for example, single-family dwellings detached, they're permitted all the way up to C3, and we really only want to permit single-family residences in residential districts, not in really, we kind of have this idea that if you can, this is our least impacted use and you can go anywhere else, we're going to kind of really narrow down in our code where this is allowed. And what that basically means for group homes is we're showing these homes, it's 8 or fewer people, I said 6, I apologize for that, is making sure that they're not in the commercial districts because, we want those to be commercial retail districts. That's, the point. Not to be residential districts where you have a large commercial zone, planned to be commercial area and you put a house right in the middle and then suddenly your commercial area becomes a residential area where they don't want commercial. And we're doing that with the group home facilities, and also, I think there's one more that we're putting in here, the dormitories, and kind of just updating that. And like I said, you'll see us kind of come back and tweak under that general idea of commercials and commercial, residentials and residential, industrials and industrial.
Very good. Any questions or comments from Mr. Graville? Entertain a motion.
Move request for the amendment to Appendix A as listed.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deach, second by Mr. Cullum to approve Appendix A, the listing of permitted and conditional uses, ADM-99. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Cullum,
Yes.
Barton,
Yes.
Durbin,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
Priest,
Yes.
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Beach.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0 with 2 absent. Next order of business will be section, bless you. Section 405.050, definitions and interpretation, ADM-98. Mr. Fick?
This is just to include the definitions for better interpretation. So we ask that you approve or amend section 405.050 to include a cluster-style mailbox, cluster mailbox area, transitional living facility, and group home for mentally, developmentally, and physically handicapped persons.
Do you have any questions or comments from Mr. Fick? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for amendments to section 405.050 definitions and interpretations, ADM-98.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Holt, second by Mr. Priest to approve section 405.050 definitions and interpretation, ADM-98. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Cullum,
Yes.
Barton,
Yes.
Durbin,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Passes 0 with 2 absent. And the last order of business tonight will be the subdivision approval request for Mosers at 1035 Armory Road, subdivision -SUBD-73. Who's going to speak on that? Mr. Fick?
Yes, we had a
I'm
request.
gonna jump in on this.
Can I jump in on it?
So we had a request for a re-subdivision of Lot 1A of Mosier Subdivision Plat 3. So they were just requesting to split off what previously was a Vantage Credit Union at 1033 Armory Road, and it's being divided from Mosier's at 1035 Armory Road. For staff comments, there was no site improvements proposed as the site was already developed and the sidewalks were already installed. Now, the Mosier's parking lot, it's not going to have the minimum required parking spaces after the lot's divided. So the Warrenton City Code section 405.250 requires one spot for every 250 square feet of the building. So Mosier's is 30,000 square feet, so that divided by 250 comes out to 120 parking spaces. So they're going to have roughly 95 after that lot is split. So they're 25 short at this time.
For the parking there, so here was Moser's and here's Vantage, and you're talking about splitting it in two. But you're saying that what Moser's has currently for parking, if that's added to and moved over to where Vantage was, will that meet the requirements for both?
So no, if it's split, they're going to lose, I think, to almost 30 spots, and that takes away from their parking right now. So that they're without, so they're only going to have 95 spots after you split that property.
Yeah, so Bart and I talked about this before, and Bart and I are already talking about coming up with some ideas. I think it's not as probably as big of a deal as it sounds. So basically what happened is this is an old development, not old in age, it's well kept up, but it's been around. How long do you think, Bart?
I don't know how long Moser's been there, but over 20, probably pushing
Early
30 years.
Okay, so they had, when they developed this was one lot with parking, joint parking that's here. It currently does not meet our municipal code for a retail establishment. When they subdivide this off, essentially what it does is it triggers a requirement that this piece of land right here, this property, come up to our current parking requirement, which is already, below, even with all this all these spaces is already below what is required. So what Bart and I talked about before here is we're going to look at a cross-access where they can share parking for these two. We got to see what our code does, because talking to Neil, and I think he's probably right, if they're required to have 20 spaces, they can't share that 20 spaces to get them up to their number. It was recently restriped and they eliminated some spaces and they widened a lot of the spaces, so Bart's going to talk to him about coming up with some additional spaces back here to meet the requirements, along here to meet the requirements, and we're going to see where we can come up with enough spaces. The subdivision that is here tonight is the only thing that's in front of you. They have a right, an administrative right, to get this subdivision here because, Neil, as I understand it in your analysis, they meet all the requirements of code, correct?
That's correct.
What the parking issue that comes up is not related to this. They can peel that off. It makes this no longer a legal non-conforming or in compliance with the municipal code. This will, upon recording of this, if the parking solution is not reached, what has already been approved by the city will no longer be under approval, or will no longer be in compliance. This is a question for the future. We bring it up now, obviously, to make Bart aware of it, and we had a discussion about coming up with some solutions. But you're not deciding what happens here tonight. You're only basically determining whether or not they meet the code to subdivide these two lots, and if they do, then you approve it.
Thank you.
They're making the decision to take their property out of compliance, and I'm making sure Bart knows that so he can't say he didn't know later. But we'll work on something and see what we can come up with.
This has nothing to do with 1C and 1D at all.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the fact that I just want to put it on the record that 1F will no longer comply with the city code. But yes, it's
Right,
just
1F will not. Right.
Yeah, 1C and 1D do not apply.
1E looks pretty close to the existing building. I mean, the line,
I don't think there's setbacks in the commercial zones.
sounds okay.
Right, yeah, so,
Thank you.
so it's about 6 foot off the building, to allow for a 5-foot utility easement through there on that side. And that's because of the parking space, and to keep that a straight line, as you know, which we don't have the aerial, but, towards the back, there's parking off the side of Mosher's and some access there, and so that's why they're doing that.
If you put the cross axis here and a cross axis here, why couldn't you pave this for additional?
I mean, it could be paved.
I bet there's more than enough there.
I mean, there's enough space, it's just, if you go through the paving and go through that process, or some restriping.
Oh, is this not paved?
Back there? No.
Yeah. Oh, it's not.
I don't believe it is.
The whole stripe on the back there, I think Agape owns more of that than just what this shows. Toward the very, very back where the subdivision is back there, there's quite a long grassy strip and then a white plastic fence. We were looking at getting storage units down there at one time. It hasn't happened.
Well, we'll talk about it. I just wanted to make sure Bart was aware.
We're going to be working on finding a solution to the parking issue.
Slopes really hard when it gets to
Right.
the back there too.
And the Agape lots are off of this, outside of this.
Right.
This re-subdivision. They were in a previous re-subdivision, but yes, they do have some space north of that drive.
Basically, though, 1E is all we're deciding on, talking about, or looking at.
1E and 1F, yeah. Just whether or not we should take 5 acres and divide it into a 1.5 and a 3.5 acre.
You're saying that parking spots on 1C cannot be used
Well,
because, I mean, they're
this-
rarely used there.
if this is not, we don't know what this use is, so that Neil applied the minimum amount of spaces necessary, which is 20. I think it'd probably be more if it's retail, if they have retail that go in there. If retail goes in there, they're gonna be in a parking position anyway, so, if it's an office, then they'll have the 20 spaces, but they can't count these 20 spaces towards any excess spaces they could count towards that, but, there is a lot of space here to come up with parking.
Yeah, and that's why we can't come up with a quick solution now, because I need to discuss with Mr. Moser what his intent is for the occupancy of the Vantage building. Because if it's, if it's a restaurant, it's higher than retail. And if it's office, it's less than retail. And to find out where that's at. So that's the kicker. So if
Privacy game.
it is, and if it goes back to a bank, then it's a lot closer to being code than anything else. But we want to make sure that we have this planned out properly, so that if it's sold or if it's leased, that there's not a huge, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know I need to add 20 parking spaces. We want to work that out ahead of time if all possible. So
Good deal.
that's why we're just here to get this part started too.
Have questions or comments? Get a motion then.
Get a motion that we adding of the two.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Durbin, second by Mr. Cooper to approve the subdivision approval request for Mosers at 1035 Army Road, SUBD-73. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll close the meeting and turn it over to Mr. Fick for any other further announcements.
I don't have any new ones. Right now, I don't have anything planned for next month for planning and zoning.
Update on Rural King going on down there?
They're moving along. Yeah, they're chugging, but I don't have anything definite. Looking good right now.
Other questions or comments for the good of the group? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Deitch always approves the motion to adjourn. Second by Mr. Cooper. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Mr. Corman, I didn't know if you realized or not, but there's a parking issue with that Moser's. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for coming out.